Welcome to Through the Trauma podcast. My name is Amber Larkins, published photographer, storytelling expert, visual artist, entrepreneur, speaker, and coach. This podcast was born from one question: how do I get inspiring stories of triumph out to the people who need to hear them the most? Come with me, enter my world, where lives are getting changed, heroes are getting developed, and greatness is being achieved. Hello, and welcome to another episode of Through the Trauma podcast. I am Amber Larkins, your host, and today I have with me Mr. Jack Daly. And Jack is a former U.S. Naval officer. He has over 20 years of service. He saw a lot of things while he was in service, and it has prompted him to go out and find a modality to help assist people. So he's going to get into all of this, his story, and how he found this modality and how it's helping other people. But Jack, thank you so much for coming on today and sharing with us and telling us all about what you found.
Amber, thank you very much for having me. I greatly appreciate it.
So tell me a little bit about yourself. Did I leave anything out of your introduction? Is there anything else you'd like to share?
I'm a retired naval officer and prior enlisted. I spent my first 6 years as an enlisted sailor. And I enlisted in 1983, and by 1989, I had my commission as a United States naval officer. So it was something I was determined to do from the time I was probably about 8 years old. When I was in third grade, I was old enough and high enough in this parochial school that I went to, Catholic school, mind you, that we were granted access to the school's one-room library, a very small library. And I stumbled upon a book that dealt with the US Naval Academy. It was a picture book. And I think over the next 5 years between third grade and graduation, I probably had that book out 95% of the time. I just kept taking it out because I was convinced that that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to go to the Naval Academy. Well, that didn't quite pan out for me for a variety of reasons. So at one point in my life in 1983, after being married, first child born, economy in really bad shape, both spouse and myself out of work, I decided to finally take the plunge, pun intended, and join the Navy. So enlisted in 1983, commissioned in 89, and retired in 2003.
Wow, that's quite the career in the Navy. You enjoyed it?
Oh, I did immensely until 1997. My career was great. It was progressing rather rapidly. I was moving up the ladder. I had a good reputation in naval intelligence, specifically, was my final career path until I was assigned to the Maritime Forces Pacific in Canada on Vancouver Island, just outside the city of Victoria, if people are familiar with Victoria in the Pacific Northwest. And it was a strange situation up there where the closest U.S. naval bases were in the Puget Sound area near Seattle and Tacoma, Washington. And there were Russian and Chinese merchant vessels, or cargo vessels, for lack of a better term, interacting with our ballistic missile submarines during their transits in and out of port, and also our aircraft carrier battle groups, to the point where the Office of Naval Intelligence and the Navy writ large had a great concern about what exactly were they up to. So I was assigned up there because of my background in merchant shipping within naval intelligence. And what I learned while I was up there, I came back and briefed senior leadership in the Office of Naval Intelligence as to what was going on, what we believed was happening. That resulted in my being tasked to get in a helicopter with a brand new $30,000 digital camera from Kodak that I was testing and take pictures of one of these ships.
Mm.
And the vessel's name was the Capitan Man, flying under the flag of Russia. Uh, During the flight, we found out hours post-flight that someone on the ship had fired a laser at the helicopter I was in. And days later, it was learned that I had suffered eye damage as well as had the Canadian pilot from a laser. So that's bad enough in and of itself, because it was career ending for Captain Pat Barnes, who was the Canadian pilot. And he was about to retire, and he had a very lucrative civilian flying career lined up for when he retired. For me, it was not so much career ending, although as things digressed over the coming years from 97 through 99, it was a struggle. But the biggest impact that it had to me was physically, where that was some 27 plus years ago, and I have not had a pain-free minute in those 27 plus years. So that's been the struggle for me, besides my machinations and gyrations that I had to go through with the US Navy to be able to retire, because the story broke in the press about 5 weeks after the incident. The incident happened on April 4th of 1997, and on May 14th, the story appeared on the front page of the Washington Times. And by the end of the evening of the 15th, it was everywhere. I
Mm.
mean, global coverage. I watched an episode of CNN International and heard my name mentioned and the story conveyed to people. I got a call from a friend, a counterpart in Bahrain, late one night. He goes, "Jack, geez, what are you doing up there, man? Your name and where you work and what you do is all over the Middle East newspapers." He said, "You were supposed to go up there and have a good time." I said, "Well, a good time, it depends on your definition." So that was a tough, tough situation to deal with, fighting to save my career, to save my retirement. I had children in high school. I wanted to ensure that there was money for their college educations. I wanted to ensure that there was something salvageable from my 20 years in the Navy, in the form of a retirement check. But that has played out as it has. I still deal with the pain. Some days it's more than I can handle, so I have to call in sick at work. I have to go sit in the dark because that's the only relief I get. But that's not the only traumatic situation that I experienced while I was in the Navy. I watched 5 of my friends die one night right in front of my eyes.
Mm.
When their E-2 Hawkeye, which is the aircraft that flies on board and off of aircraft carriers that has the radar dome that spins on the top. And there was a fire on board the aircraft, and I watched them from a TV camera fly right into the ocean, and all 5 were killed instantly, if they weren't already dead from the smoke inhalation in the plane. I also knew of a squadron commanding officer just 3 days prior who I saw, and he made the comment to me that he had never been as tired as he was that night, and he went out and flew, and he didn't come back. He flew into the water's edge down in Puerto Rico on
Mm.
Vieques Island. So that was back to back traumas that we all had to deal with. Being in the Navy and being on board an aircraft carrier, those type of incidents are not unique by any stretch of the imagination, especially when it comes to flying uh, out in the deep blue sea where there's no land around to go back to. So a pilot or an aircrew might have to ditch in the middle of the ocean. So not unexpected, but it's a lot to deal with, and it leaves an indelible mark uh, on your psyche and on your mind. I can't watch a military movie without tearing up at the end or getting choked up, getting a lump in my throat at the end because I think about those men that I worked with and saw and ate with every day for months on end. So that's the trauma side of what I've experienced in my career in the Navy.
Mhm. I mean, that's difficult, and for someone who is like myself, who I've never been in the military, and I don't, not off the top of my head, can even think of any family members that have been in the military, so it's foreign to me. I don't I've talked to a couple people, interviewed them here on the podcast, but I can only imagine like the difficulties of that. I think that civilians who's not been in the military probably can't fully wrap their mind around the type of trauma that is suffered from someone who's been enlisted, especially spent time, like a lot of time, like you did, 20 years. Do you think that everyone, like, I know people's experience in the military is vastly different. Would you say that that's true?
Yes, absolutely. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, you're fine.
Uh, I pale in my situation pales in comparison to many of the soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines who were involved in the global war on terrorism, whether it was in Afghanistan or in Iraq, and they have come home broken in numerous ways. Whether some lost their eyesight because of concussions from IED explosions, or worse, some have lost limbs, and obviously there are those who lost their lives, and I'm sure we'll get to this, but that was one of the impetus for me writing the book Laugh Out Loud, which you can see over my right shoulder here in the background. Um, I really pale in comparison. I don't want the audience to misconstrue that my situation was the worst anybody could experience, because it's not. I mean, it really, really is minor in the grand scheme of things when you think about those veterans who you see on the Tunnels to Towers commercials, where they're modified kitchens and modified homes because they're confined to a wheelchair or some other apparatus.
Mhm.
So I just want to make sure that is noted.
You have had interaction with people that you were in the military with, obviously, and then do you work with people that have come out of the military that have, like, PTSD or struggle with some of the things that they've seen over there?
Yes, I have a very close friend who has been struggling with PTSD, and he was actually in a civilian role over in Iraq. And I know of other folks within the organization I work in now. I still work for the Department of Defense. I couldn't quite break away. I did for several years, but I came back and I worked in a unique situation in an underground command bunker.
Mm.
And that in and of itself can cause some stress uh, because you don't, the only way you get to see the outside is on closed circuit TV. There's no windows in the mountain that I work in. So there are folks that I work with on a regular basis, and folks who I have met even here in the 55 and older retirement community that I live in, who are Vietnam vets and
Mhm.
struggling. So my exposure is varied, I guess is the
Mhm.
best way to put it. Yeah.
Have you ever have you gone through therapy yourself? Any type of PTSD therapy?
Some, yes. I was diagnosed back in the mid to late 90s, actually the late 90s, I should clarify. After the incident, I went through a series of uh, medical interventions for the pain, as well as some you know, mental interventions to help deal with the pain on a daily basis. And at that time, I was told that I had evidence of. I don't know if I have full blown, but I have had evidence of. Still, probably do. Um, it's interesting. One day can be a good day, and one day can be doldrums uh, and challenges,
Hmm.
to say the very least, to deal with some of the day to day stuff,
Hmm.
and day to day nonsense specifically. So
Hmm.
there's there's always day to day nonsense in the government.
Well, and in anything really, I mean, there's always. It's like our journey through this life is we're inundated with experiences, and sometimes experiences that's not worth our time and energy to
Yeah.
address, and then other things that are like need to be addressed immediately. So I think that's with anything. I I find the people that have been in the military and have come out of the military, I find it interesting because again, it's a world I can only enter through my imagination. Fully I can only imagine. I can't fully put myself into that situation. However, I do understand trauma, having done this show and then just my own personal experience and having talked to other people that haven't necessarily come on the show, but they have shared their heart with me about trauma. And you mentioned something about this idea of you can be having a really good day and then all of a sudden, like it just creeps up out of nowhere. And I think that while I do think that is PTSD, I think that's a trigger that anybody can experience that's been through any type of trauma. And I've seen that. I can definitely relate to that in and of itself because I just had this conversation recently about how you can be going through your life, like day to day life, and then something happen, and it's like triggering that same response center in your brain to where now you're reacting. You're not, and sometimes we react to things and we're like, I don't even know where that came from. Why did I get so offended? Why did I get so angry? Why did I get like, why did that provoke that emotion inside of me? So I think that that's something that we all face. And I do believe all people have gone through some type of trauma at varying degrees. I think for me, like trying to piece it together and see that it's vastly different, like the PTSD veterans experience coming out of the military versus the trauma that just people experience through grief or brokenheartedness or violence or any kind of other type of thing. But I'm curious, have you had other people that you've helped that have come to you that's not necessarily veterans, but they've suffered some type of trauma or they are dealing with some type of PTSD?
I have one individual, a young man, who works in the location where I work, and I know that he has struggled with demons that are not related to his military service. He did not serve in the military, and he and I have had a few chats on occasion over the last few years when he's overwhelmed by whatever it is he's trying to deal with or push away. It's very interesting. There is a group, and I forget the name of the group. They're out of Central Ohio. They are a veterans group. They hold like a a schoolhouse, so to speak, for veterans, especially those who are suffering from PTSD, and they help them out with group sessions, etc. People talking about what they're dealing with, and they did a study over a period of years, and they learned that 95% of the veterans who were dealing with PTSD had a triggering PTSD moment in their childhood.
Mm.
So that was very interesting to me that correlation was made, because I would say the triggering moment for me in my childhood, there were probably two. Um, I lived in a 3-story home in Philadelphia. The third floor was a separate apartment, and I was standing in the kitchen with my grandmother, who was tying my shoes one day when I was in first grade, at the ripe old age of 6. And the man who lived upstairs came running down the stairs screaming, "She killed my baby! She killed my baby!" His wife uh, had wrapped the child up in a dry cleaning plastic bag and suffocated it. And I learned later that day that she had jumped in front of a high-speed rail train. So, as a 6-year-old kid, that left an indelible impression as well. And then, prior to that, my mother had actually uh, run away when I was 3 years old and abandoned me, uh, left me with my grandmother, and she literally disappeared. So that was a lot to deal with between the ages of 3 and 6. And so those, I figure, probably were my trigger points as a child
Mm-hmm.
that, uh, just promoted the PTSD later in life after the laser incident and the other two things that I had witnessed.
Mm-hmm.
So it's it's almost, I don't want to say demonic uh, ailment, but it has its moments where you can't run away from that demon. It's there, and there's no warning. It creeps up, as you mentioned, Amber, for the strangest reason. What triggered that reaction, that response that I just gave to that individual based on what just happened? Uh, you almost feel like you're completely out of control at times,
Mm-hmm.
and you go back and you say, "What in the world did I do that for? That is getting me nowhere." Uh, it it was unfair to that individual, unfair to whoever else might be within earshot.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah, it's not something that you have total control over.
Mm-hmm. And I don't think you're alone. I don't think you're alone in feeling that. I think that's part of the human experience, really, is that, you know, for human beings here in this world, is like that we are constantly having to navigate through situations and relationships and interactions with other people. And I think that it's not foreign for us to react sometimes. But I also think that this is why I'm so passionate about trauma, because I feel like so many people can endure trauma and we don't know what to do with it. I went through a divorce. When I went through my divorce 6 years ago almost, I'd never been through divorce before. I didn't know how to navigate that. That is a traumatic situation. And a lot of times it is. And in my case, it was. And it was like, I don't know how to navigate that. So now I'm trying to learn how to navigate this. And this is why I personally think it's important to normalize therapy, to normalize having difficult conversations, to normalize being able to say, I went through this thing, and it might not seem like a lot to everybody, or it might seem like a lot where people are like, oh my God, I can't believe you went through this thing. Divorce is one of those things you're like, oh, well, a lot of people go through that. But until you go through it, it's like you have to understand that some people handle it really well. Some people handle it really horribly. Some people fall anywhere on that spectrum. I'm just using that as an example, but it's very that's kind of how trauma is. But I think the big takeaway with that is that like, let's get to the bottom of it and not be controlled by that trauma anymore. And learning how to navigate through and finding the help that we can to release that trauma in healthy ways. And that's that's really why, like, I love bringing people like yourself on to, to talk to my audience and to talk to people that listen to the show, because every little thing, like, is going to affect people differently. So you have a modality, which I'm excited to get into to talk about, but you have this modality that maybe it helps people, maybe helps some people maybe not. But to explore that and see if it can release that trauma, that's the important thing, because stuffing the trauma is never a good idea. It's always going to manifest and come back out. And I'll just say this as well. I think that sometimes trauma comes out on different layers. In our human experience, we can tolerate certain levels, and then you're like, okay, I've overcome that. I've healed from that. I'm over that. And then a trigger will happen a year later, or whatever. And then you're triggered again. You're like, oh, hold on. I'm still triggered by that. Maybe I'm not fully over it. And now there's another layer that has to be pulled back. I just think it's important for people to be aware that no one's alone in a life where part of the human existence is trauma. And we need to normalize being able to talk about it and being able to share about it and being able to find other people to connect with on that. And I want to know your thoughts about that. And then I do want you to kind of get into this process of discovery, of kind of how you discovered, when you talk to us about the modality and how you discovered that as well.
The lifesaver for me, uh, literally, as well as figuratively, uh, was the ability to laugh. Um, I was dealing with situations after the laser attack where I definitely had a bullseye on my back. I'd like to say bullseye on my forehead, considering where my injuries were. And I had to shrug it off, but I found a way to laugh things off. And I remember one particular day, a Defense Security Service agent who had kind of contacted me the previous day via phone. Uh, and I told, I'm happy to talk to you. However, you have to go through the proper channels. You need to talk to my commanding officer. You need to work it through there as well as through my attorneys. Uh, and he just showed up the next morning unannounced at my desk, and I sent him packing. And I started laughing because the guy literally waddled away. His physique was such that that was the way his gait presented itself as he walked. And I started chuckling, and the gent in the decks next to mine, he goes, Jack, how do you do it, man? I said, do what, Kevin? He goes, how do you deal with all the BS? And I said, Kevin, I have to laugh, because if I don't laugh, I'm going to cry, and that's just going to make my eyes worse. So I have to laugh about things. And that was my coping mechanism for dealing with what I was dealing with. And then what triggered me to pursue um, writing laugh out loud with this daily practice of using the word laugh as a mnemonic to carry out the 5 steps in the book was a radio report one morning in 2020, before COVID hit, that said in 2019, 498 active duty service members committed suicide. 198 family members, spouses and dependent children, had committed suicide. And the most appalling number was the 6,489 veterans who had committed suicide in the previous year. I was shocked by that. Um, I came home that evening, and my wife and I had dinner, and we were sitting in front of the TV watching news afterwards, and that same report came on. And she looked at me and she said, Jack, what the heck is going on? I said, I don't know, honey. I really don't know. I don't understand it. But I think about a very close friend that I served with and knew he was struggling with demons. And I thought, geez, if I can only help him out, whatever I need to do to help him, maybe it could help others. But if I at least help him, it's worth whatever effort. And Andrea asked me, she goes, "What got you through your darkest days?" And I said, "Laughter." And I said, "Okay, what do I do with laughter that can help others that are struggling, and not just veterans? I mean, the suicide rate among teens these days is astronomical. So there are a lot of people struggling, and especially, teens and veterans. So I thought to myself, okay, I'm not going to be a stand-up comic. I'm not that funny. I tell granddad jokes these days, so that's really bad. But I mean, I've taken it a level beyond dad jokes. But when I saw the statistic that there were over 30,000 active duty and veteran suicides in the 20 years since 9/11, compared to the 7,000 uh, deaths in combat. I mean, it was 4 times more than those killed in combat. And I thought, I've got to do something. And I had been practicing a routine on my own uh, by a young man named Hal Elrod. He wrote a book called The Miracle Morning, and it had a routine in there called Savers, if you're familiar with it. You're shaking your head, so
I
I.
I like where you're going with this, but no, I'm not
Yeah.
familiar with it.
Okay. So I decided, well, maybe I could do the same thing, but for different purposes and through a different modus operandi, so to speak. So I developed the 5 steps using the word laugh. So the first step is to laugh. Find something to laugh about, whatever it is. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how silly. It doesn't matter if you're alone in a crowded room. Whatever it is, it makes you laugh. And then act. Get up from behind the desk. Get off the sofa. Go take a walk. Do some jumping jacks. Exercise. Get air in your lungs. Do something that is worth the effort for your health
Hmm.
and your mental well-being. And then the word unplug. Put the devices down, put the iPhones down, the Androids, everything, unplug, and take a look around you. You know, people are, are doing this to the point where I think they're going to start building caskets with a bubble, at the head. So somebody that died with their head down they'll be able to fit in the casket. Uh, grow, learn something new. Uh, you know, I would love to learn how to knit. I haven't tried it yet, but I would love to try it because it's dexterity with the hands, and it's something I don't know how to do. But I admire every person I've ever seen who has knitted a scarf or a sweater or blow glass. That would be a blast to be able to do that and make some kind of a beautiful vase or something. And then H for humor me or humor somebody else. Make somebody else laugh because that's the highest um, level of laughter there can be is when you make somebody else laugh or at least make them smile. Um, I'm a prankster at heart. So on Halloween, I torture my wife with plastic arachnids throughout the house, under her pillow, in the refrigerator, wherever I can figure she'll find them. I pay a price for that, mind you, but it gets her to laugh after she stops screaming, obviously. So those 5 steps, and it's a daily ritual. And however much time you want to spend doing each of the steps, my recommendation is try to spend at least 5 to 6 minutes on each step, um, or 12 minutes if you have an hour to spend on it. Or you can spend 5 minutes on it. Do each one for a minute. And it doesn't matter where you do it. You could be at your desk at work. You could be at home. You could be in the commute. Uh, Public transportation, people are probably going to look at you a little oddly, but maybe we'll get somebody to laugh in the process. So, you've got the check in the block for the H. And I thought, if I could get this word out, if I could spread the word about the book, doing various podcasts specifically, doing some advertising. I advertised the book in Times Square one day for about, I think it was 40 seconds a pop. Uh, you know, Unfortunately, the book's gotten lumped in with joke books. I think I need to go into Amazon and manipulate my advertisements so that this doesn't get lumped in, because it's not a joke book. It's a very serious book. It's trying to help people, not necessarily as a cure, but as a coping mechanism. And I emphasize that as much as possible. It served me as a coping mechanism, and I hope it'll serve others as a coping mechanism as well.
So I find this very interesting because I agree with what you're saying, and I did some studying a while back, I would say. So I come out of photography. I've done photography for over a decade, and it's funny to me because there's this concept, and there is actually a technical name for it, like a scientific name for it, and I don't know what that is, but I just call it posturing. But really, it's this idea of when someone's struggling in a photo shoot, and this translates into life, just not just in a photo shoot, it translates into, if you're sitting at your desk and you're struggling with staying focused, or whatever you're struggling with, this idea of posturing yourself. So I'll give you an example. If I'm at a photo shoot and I want to communicate power, I will tell someone like to stand in this power pose. And sometimes putting your body in that particular stance gives you more power. It sends messages to your brain to be, you are more powerful. And it's funny because I don't know what comes first. I don't know if people think power and then get into the stance and then it's like a domino effect. But I do know and it's been proven too, like just widening your body promotes confidence. So if you just kind of widen your body, like spread your body, it's automatically subconsciously sends messages to your brain, carry yourself in a specific way that promotes confidence, or it promotes power or strength or empowerment. So it's really interesting because what you're saying is very similar. And I do have some experience with actually seeing that happen in people, and not just in other people. Like I've seen that happen in clients, but I've also seen that happen in myself, and I've played with this. Another example of this, which is interesting, is what type of clothing that you have on. Like that plays a huge effect in how you present yourself. So it's weird how these little subliminal things can affect our brains, our minds, our psyche, and how we are showing up, not only for other people but also for ourselves.
Um, it's interesting that you touch on that. When I was a high school senior, uh, I was on a business, kind of a business curriculum, and one of the classes I took taught us how to handle job interviews. And we were literally sent out to a variety of different businesses in the city to uh, undergo interviews. And one of the body language lessons that we were taught, that if you are sitting in the interview and the interviewer sits back in their chair and crosses their arms, you might as well hope for the next one, because you've said something or you've come across in some way that was less than positive, and your chances of getting the position are probably slim. So I remember a position I applied for where it was a panel, and we were sitting at a long conference table, and the lady directly across from me sat back, folded her arms, and I just thought, I'm done. You know, I just lost. This isn't going to happen. And that affected the rest of the interview for me, because I knew I already had, she was going to be a no when
Mhm.
they did their vote. So you're absolutely right. Those uh, postures, those, subliminal messages that are conveyed simply through whether somebody sits back, crosses their arm, or somebody leans forward and is interested in what you're saying. Uh, I- they're very unique, and I don't think people necessarily pick up on them as in saying, "Oh, well, he's leaning forward, so he likes what I'm saying." They may not even realize it in most cases, especially if they haven't had any of the similar training.
Well, it's
So,
funny, they may not, but they do. It's like a subliminal. You do
mhm,
pick up, like, these cues you do pick up on subliminally. Like, you may not know that that's one of those things. It's not a trigger, but it's similar to a trigger in the sense of, like, if someone leans forward, even though you may not have noticed they necessarily leaned forward, you're like, "Oh, this person's
mhm,
really interested in what I'm saying." And you may not even know why you think they're interested, and it's as simple as them just kinda leaning forward. It's amazing to me how our brains do that, like, how that plays such a big part in and just our interactions with other humans. But this idea of laughing out loud, like, I know we're kind of hitting about all these different posturing techniques, but it's funny because I've seen this in my photography as well. Because I've started shooting a lot more branding stuff like over the years, and when I work with brands, I will, you want to get like a fun, like I'm having fun, like capture that shot. A lot of times I'll have people laugh. Like, I'm like, I want to laugh. Like, I want you to fake laugh so I can capture that on video
right.
or on camera. And when they do it, it makes them laugh. Then all of us start laughing. Everyone that's there, me being the photographer, them being the subject I'm shooting. And then if we have a videographer, whoever's behind the scenes, they start laughing. So
It's
it's very,
infectious.
it,
Yeah.
it, it is. It's very true what you're saying.
Y-
Have you noticed if someone's in the midst of depression, let's just say like you're in a really dark place, you're really sad, and if you can consciously say to yourself, like, I'm in a really bad place, but I'm going to consciously just make myself laugh. Like, I'm going to fake laugh about something. What's your experience with that? Does that help?
It does help. I've noted that on several occasions, not only uh, myself, but I've seen it in others where they'll fake laugh over something, or something will cause them to laugh to the point where they cry. They end up they end up crying, and that's a stress reliever. That emotional outlet, to let those tears flow, as minor or as major as the crying can be, is a stress reliever, because otherwise they've got it bottled up, and the reason they're crying is because they have it bottled up and they're trying to deal with it, but I think they subconsciously admit, I can't deal with this. I have to get this out, and that serves as a form of relief. Once again, crying, just like laughter, is another coping mechanism. So there's nothing wrong with it. Um, the macho male attitude would be, "Oh, I can never cry. At least I can never let anybody ever see me cry." Uh, and I think that's been debunked probably decades ago, where you're not going to do it in public necessarily, but there's nothing wrong with it, especially if it's a release and helps you maybe step back from the precipice of wanting to take your own life.
Mm.
Uh, I can't begin to imagine, although I had my moments where it was more than I thought I could deal with, uh, especially the aftermath of the laser attack. Um, but I think it will help people take a step back from the edge before they make that final decision. I prayed it. I really pray it does.
Mhm.
I pray Laugh Out Loud gives people a respite from their woes, even if it's only for a few minutes. I keep my fingers crossed.
Well, sometimes that's what it takes when someone's on the verge of suicide. sometimes they are living life moment by moment. It is a matter of just getting through. I've heard other people say this, like just getting through that next moment, or just getting through the next day, or just getting through this week.
Mm.
And, our emotions are constantly up and down. They can change. I know for a fact I've used laughter when I've been so angry about something that it's like I have to laugh to contain my temper because I do have a temper. um, but I do think it's very true. And the simplicity of this. That's what I really love, because sometimes I think with trauma modalities people can come in and some of them are complicated. Some of them are more intense. But it's sometimes it can be overly complicated when
Mhm.
this is something that is found inside of you, and it's not, you don't have to just say, because sometimes you don't feel like, if you're down or you're grieving, you can't be like, I just feel like laughing, so I'm just going to laugh. But maybe those are the moments that you need to step away and go watch a comedy movie, or go
Mhm.
find something that can take your mind off of the immediate situation so that you can laugh about it. It does increase your mood. And there is one other thing I wanted to address that you said, getting up and like moving around. I don't know how many people have been to like a Tony Robbins event, but he is huge on this idea of like transmuting energy and getting up and dancing. And I have been in these, I've seen him speak like 3 times, and he had like, it completely changes the energy in the room.
I didn't attend a Tony Robbins seminar, but I have heard him speak. Most recently, he was on the Tucker Carlson show several months ago, and Tucker posed the scenario that truly exists these days, and he says that, you know, Tony, the world just seems sad. Uh, Humanity seems sad. And I could not have agreed with him more, because look what we have dealt with COVID first and foremost. Look at what is going on in, strife ridden nations and regions. You've got the war in Ukraine, you've got the war in Israel, or the war in the Middle East. So you have a war in Europe, the war in the Middle East, and God forbid if we have a war in the Indo-Pacific region. So that's a lot. That is a lot for people to deal with, and they're bombarded daily, 24/7, 365, with news blurbs and social media, which I won't go into specifics because they probably end up having to hire a lawyer, but there are social media platforms that are spewing propaganda, and I'll leave it at that. Uh, we're bombarded, so people are overwhelmed, uh, and that stress is overwhelming. And laughter actually is been proven to be a stress reliever. Uh, of the So there's a serotonin level that laughing increases in your body and in your brain, that helps fight the depression, the effects of depression. There are medical benefits to laughter, including not a cure for, but helping people with heart disease, helping people with cancers, helping people with diabetes, and it's proven. The medical community has proven that laughter does help because of these neuropeptides that the act of laughing uh, emits throughout one's body, that can help fight some of these maladies.
Mm.
So there's an odd statistic of I believe it's 825,000 plus self-help books that exist in the market as of the end of 2022. Only 25% of those are actually ever scientifically tested. And the ones on laughter happen to have been scientifically tested, and it's proven fact they help. So take it, take advantage of having that chuckle.
Well, there you go. There you go. Just because it's simple doesn't mean that it's not effective. In fact,
Right.
it's very effective and it's free. It's something that you can do right in your in your own psyche, right? So
Exactly.
why not try it?
Right.
Um, but I love that you have, you've written a book to kind of showcase this and how this works and probably descriptive of telling people how to do this, how to kind of transmute those emotions into laughter. Um, Tell us a little bit about your book and where I know you mentioned Amazon, but where else can people find your book?
Well, any of their favorite online retailers, whether it's Barnes and Noble or Kobo, let alone Amazon, the book can be found there. So wherever they normally use, Amazon's probably the primary one and the most recognized, but there are several others out there. Um, if you look under Laugh Out Loud, make sure to add Jack Daly to your search term, because otherwise you're going to come up with probably 1,001 joke books, which you have to dig down through all of those to find this one. I probably should have used a different title, but you know, it is what it is, and right now, it's in ebook format. It's in paperback format, and I'm currently working on the audiobook version, which has been a real education for me. I didn't know that there was so much involved. I'm doing it myself. That's why it's been a real education, um, because the prices for doing it hiring a voice actor and doing it in a studio are a little cost prohibitive right now as a struggling author.
Yeah, I've heard that before. I'm not an author myself, but I've heard that before. So this is so awesome. I would encourage people to definitely check out his book. Do you have other ways people can get in contact with you if they were looking to work with you? Do you work with people like that?
Sure. Probably the best way to get a hold of me is it's www.jackdalyauthor. So that's JACKD as in dog, ALYAUTHOR.com. So jackdalyauthor.com.
Awesome. And I'll get that in the show notes as well for people that
Okay,
like to read it or click the link, make it super easy.
that'd be great.
Um, but it's been a very interesting conversation. I love your perspective on things, and I love the way that you're giving back by really helping people out with this. Um, do you have any final takeaways or anything you'd like to leave our audience with today?
Absolutely. Uh, and I could probably summarize the entire book and my attitude and the impetus behind this in the simple phrase: don't suffer in silence.
Mm,
Seek assistance. There are hotlines for veterans and military. There's a veterans hotline that can be called, and I should have it memorized, and I don't, unfortunately, but it does exist. So for people anywhere, you don't have to be depressed for this book to make a difference in your life. Um, it can, regardless of whether you're the happiest person on earth or you're the person that's struggling 24/7, 365.
mhm.
Um, the only other thing I'll say is keep an eye out for my second book titled Blind Treason. It goes more into that laser attack and the aftermath about that. And I hope to have that by the end of the year on the shelves. Not
Mhm.
literally, but on Amazon's shelf.
Awesome. That's so awesome. And it's good to stay equipped. So even if you're
Yes.
not in the midst of depression, knowing how, or in the midst of any kind of emotional instability, it's always good to come equipped with how to handle those emotions before they actually arise. Um, and that just goes into self development and self growth and just ultimately handling all the trauma that people you're faced with throughout this human existence.
Well, it may be the situation where someone has read Laugh Out Loud and practices it and can help somebody else. I mean, what greater act can a human do in their lifetime than help somebody who is struggling?
Mm. I love that. I love that. Well, Jack, thank you so much for sharing today with my audience and just for spending the time with me on this day, just kind of sharing with us. So I appreciate you so much. I love what you're doing. I wish your book all the greatest success. And if there's anything that I can do to help promote that other than here on the podcast, you just let me know.
I greatly appreciate it, Amber. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you for listening to Through the Trauma podcast. If you have found value in this episode or believe in the mission behind what we are doing, please subscribe so that you never miss any future episodes. Also, be sure to check out our transformation project at transformationthroughtraumaproject.com, where we help inspirational stories get heard on a larger scale through multiple platforms. If you know someone who can benefit from this episode, please share it with them. Until next time,